we're very delighted to have Dr. Octavio Chon for this BlueSciCon seminar. His topic is Astrobioethics. Dr. Chon is a professor at the, I think, Universidad de Lima. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Excellent. And he's also the founder and president of ASPAST, which is the association, the Peruvian Association for Astrobiology. So great to have a little bit of international colleagues here. And Octavio, please begin your presentation and welcome.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's an honor for me to be here sharing this new field of study, astrobioethics. What is astrobioethics? Is it a science, humanities? What's the nature, the disciplinary nature of astrobioethics? So everything starts last year in the Congress in Manizales. Do you remember, Jacob? Everything started with an idea. Jesús Martinezz Frias, I don't know if you hear of him, is the president of the planetology and astrobiology in Spain. He gave me this idea to work on it with the working group on astrobiotics and give a philosophical foundation for astrobioethics because till now there is no any paper, scientific paper on the issue, on the topics. And just recently, I sent an paper to the International Journal of Astrobiology and has been accepted. So it's just a matter of time till it's published. And once it's published, I'm going to share it with you. And this time, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of this this new field of study, astrobiotics, and also a little bit of the nature, of the disciplinary nature of astrobiology, the multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity, and the different fields of public outreach opportunities for the public outreach in science and astrobiotics. But let's start with the beginning, astrobioethics then. Astrobiotics emerged as a new discipline from astrobiology and ethics, and this studies the ethical implication of astrobiological exploration. I mean, everything that has to do with astrobiology, but in a moral dimension, in a ethical pondering, it's inside astrobioethics. But is this, is this astrobioethics necessary? Can we use another field of study? Why we talk about astrobiologics? We can talk about ethics solely, and that's it. But we're gonna see that astrobioethics is very important because uh, we're gonna have questions that we don't have it in other fields of study. For example, just giving a little bit, what I'm gonna talk further. One question is, um, are we the guardian of life in the universe? And if we are, uh, so we might have some moral obligation to expand life in universe. But if we don't, if we are not the guardian of life in universe, then that's a little bit complicated because uh, let's think about it. If we're gonna go to Mars, what's the window time allowed for us to wait and be sure that there is no life in Mars, so we can send people, we can do something in the underground. So astrobiotics is going to talk about this kind of issues, legal issues, moral issues, social issues. We're going to see it now. But before that, let's talk about some a little bit of the disciplinary nature of astrobiotics that comes from astrobiology also. It's an interdisciplinar discipline, but with a transdisciplinar modus operandi. What this means? In science, we can find different ways of interaction in scientific knowledge. We are used to hear about disciplines, scientific disciplines, like independently, each one of from another. But we have also the notion of mono, multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity. And each one of them has their own nature. Let's say, for example, monodisciplinary. What is this? It's the parcellation of reality, let's say so, that enable us to study the reality more efficiently. So you have a, you can know very much of little bit, but what's the problem here? You can become a micro-wise. I said micro-wise is the people who is an expert, has expertise on a little bit of the part of the reality, but it might become in macro ignorance. I mean, people who knows much about little and almost nothing on everything else. So uh, monodisciplinarity is good because you have a lot of knowledge, but the problem is a lot of knowledge of something specific. But in astrobiology, you need more than that. You need to make connections, to establish links between different disciplines, between biology, chemistry, philosophy, or so on. So monodisciplinarity, it's good for its own terms. Uh, In history, teaches that this point of view, the multidisciplinarity, give us very precise knowledge. But now we need more than that. We have also multidisciplinarity that is not very different from monodisciplinarity because in multidisciplinarity, and I get this idea from the UNESCO, it says they say multidisciplinarity is a space where different disciplines come together for the same purpose. But among the disciplines themselves, there is no deep methodological interaction. So you have the monodisciplines, the traditional monodisciplines, you put it all together, but you don't have a deep interaction. I mean, it's like you go to a party. You go to a party, you have your soccer team, maybe, but you can talk with your, your partner, your friend that is from a different team. But at the end of the day, you go back home, but you don't change teams. You keep your own team from the beginning. So something like that happens with multidisciplinarity. You might have many different disciplines, but at the end, between among the disciplines, there is no a deeper interaction. So at the end, you're gonna have a perception of reality that's gonna remain the same, the parcellation. Multidisciplinarity is good because it's the first level of interaction between science. So if you want to have astrobioethics or astrobiology in extent, you need this point of start. Then you have interdisciplinarity, that is the space where two or more disciplines converge to increase the specialized knowledge of one of the involved. I mean, you have two or more, but one of them is going to lead the research. It's going to lead the point of view of what you are looking for. One or more disciplines provide knowledge to strengthen another in their own field, but there is a discipline horizon. What is the discipline horizon? I call a discipline horizon where, for example, you have maybe philosophy and biology. And then you have philosophy of biology. But when you study the terms of biology, you do it in the way of philosophy. Because when you do philosophy of biology, you're not doing the biology itself. You're doing philosophy. So this is an example of interdisciplinarity. But what you see is that there is one discipline, or maybe more, giving the knowledge for one in particular. This is the discipline horizon. So in interdisciplinarity, you have again uh, increasing in the precise knowledge that comes from the monodisciplinarity. So interdisciplinarity is a way more complex, but at the end, it's not making the right connections for studying reality in a way that allows you not to understand it in a reductionist way. You need in astrobiology another point of view that allows you to to understand reality, to treat reality in a way that there is no discipline horizon, but there is what you call in Spanish, um, we replace the word importance for relevant. In a transdisciplinarity activity, you don't have the discipline horizon. You have instead a discipline that gives you the tools for for resolve, for give solution for certain problems in the astrobiology research, but in different contexts, in different moments. And that's the particular in the nature of astrobiology. But let's remember that the notion of transdisciplinarity is not only one notion. We have even two notions. That's why I put here notion of transdisciplinarity. Sorry, here I think it says notion de transdisciplinaridad, but it's my corrector from English to Spanish. But let's say one notion of transdisciplinarity is the Nicolescu. It's a holistic posture, providing general theories of knowledge handling a unified methodology. You hear me? Hello? You there?
Yes, yes, we hear you very well.
Okay, I was worried because I didn't hear nothing. Okay, we have two notions of transdisciplinarity. The first one is a very metaphysical one because it wants to unify all the methodologies in science. So you're gonna have one unique methodology in science, but that's impossible because you can't mix and make one unified methodology. That's ontologically impossible. And then you think astrobiology has one only methodology. No, astrobiology is not characterized by one methodology, and we're gonna see that I made a brief survey to Charles Cockell asking this particular question, and he told me in other things that astrobiology don't have one unique methodology, and that might be a problem for some people that it's more connected with the monodisciplinarity. People who is more in the monodisciplinary point of view, they might think that astrobiology is not a science because they are thinking in a reductionist way. But you think from the transdisciplinarity point of view, you might see astrobiology as a different, not different, but a different nature, disciplinarity nature in science. But then we have the another notion of transdisciplinarity, Gibbons. Gibbons et al. Considers it as a methodological tool not defined a priori. I mean, in the transdisciplinarity notion, the second one, the one that empathize more with astrobiology, in this concept, transdisciplinarity, modus operandi, methodology, is not given a priori. Not you don't have a right way to do things in the transdisciplinarity. You get it in the process, a posteriori, arises in the interconnection, interaction of different disciplines. I mean, how is this possible? Transdisciplinarity emerged as a tool, yes, but as a tool that takes shape in the process, in the application, because you have so many disciplines involved that you can't just, like the first notion of transdisciplinarity, make one unified point of methodology. You can't. So if you can't do that, then each time you apply transdisciplinarity ideas, you're gonna have to adapt it to the context. You have to do as the context goes on. So you're gonna never have something a priori. You're gonna have always an a posteriori. And then we have here an opinion of astrobiologist Charles Cockell. I made this brief survey last year also. I made this question between 10 questions that I sent it to him. My question was, does the astrobiology has an own methodology? And he said to me, it uses a wide variety of methods to answer scientific questions, from lab-based methods to field studies and spacecraft analysis. This is exactly what he said to me. And as you can see, this is the concept for the second notion of transdisciplinarity. But the detail here is that Professor Charles Cockell, he don't exactly know what is the word transdisciplinarity, but he uses the concept of transdisciplinarity for astrobiology. So this is something very interesting because that's tell us something that we are having a change in the notion of what is the nature, the disciplinary nature of science, of the new science, better said. And with this said, we can say that if we want to understand the nature of astrobiology or astrobioethics in general, you're going to have to change the point of view. Other way, you're going to have just a negative critic, a negative point of view of what is looking for astrobioethic and astrobiology, of course. So putting this now is clear. Now we have what is the mono, multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity, and now we have that astrobiology and astrobioethics, for instance, is a transdisciplinarity way of do things. Now, astrobioethics inherits the versatility of philosophy, since ethics, as we know, is a branch of philosophy. Ethics is a branch of philosophy and inherits the transdisciplinarity nature from astrobiology, as I said just um, a few minutes. Ethics is not properly a science, but enables us to propose critical analysis in order to make and take decisions. So, what does this mean? That in ethics, it's a branch of humanities, of philosophy. So you have the the essence of philosophy, and make right questions, not solution yet, but make us think, make us pondering about the consequences, about the moral nature of astrobioethics. So ethics uh, give us this opportunity because if we are going just from science, pure science, we might be a little bit short. We need also humanities, and ethics give the humanity component for astrobioethics. So you don't have only the science, but you have also humanities, and you have also the transdisciplinarity nature from astrobiology. So you have a very mixture here, the transdisciplinarity point of view, and the ethics and the astrobiology. So you have a very good potential here to make of this new field of science, of academic science, very, how we call it in English, we hope to have a lot of results here. At the institutional level, Astrobioethics has participation for the first time in the International Working Group on Astrobioethics, as I said at the beginning of this seminar, at the last year, led by Jesús Martinezz Frias. This working group is, we are like six, nine people here working on this new field of study, and papers on astrobiotics, as I said, the one I sent just a few months is possibly the first one on the field in the world. Who knows? But until now, I was looking for new topics of astrobiotics, but there is none. I found astroethics. And what is astroethics? I'm gonna talk about it later, but no, nothing about astroethics, not any paper yet. Due to technological limitations, astrobioethics uses much of mental experiments, of course, because let's remember, ethics inherits from philosophy, and philosophy uses a lot of mental experiments in order to help us to extend the meaning and use of certain concepts within the astrobiological framework. Of course, we cannot go yet to any exoplanet. We didn't find yet a different kind of life, non-terrestrial. So, about what we're gonna talk about moral consequences when we possibly find life. Well, we can do it in a mental experiments. For example, what is the moral consequence in contaminated enable life on Mars? We don't have any evidence of life on Mars yet, but through the mental experiment in astrobioethics, we can suppose and make questions and give some solution for certain problems that sooner or later we might expect. So in astrobioethics, we have this chance of work on these mental experiments and see until what point we are able to face these new challenges. And here we have this little, how you call it, disciplinary branch of astrobioethics that I did just for the paper. You see everything what I said just a few minutes ago. Philosophy on the top, because from philosophy comes ethics, and ethics and astrobiology goes together, and you have as a result astrobioethics. But astrobioethics might have three fundamental aspects. I put it here. I put it three. Why three? Why legal, ethical, and social? Because with the legal aspect, I found that we have the Cospar, for example, the policy of planetary protection. In the ethical aspect is very important because in the Cospar there is any mention of ethics or moral aspect, and it is important if you want to do astrobioethics that you talk about the ethical aspect of everything you do in astrobiology exploration, and at the end the social aspect, because as we're gonna see in this speech in this seminar, population, the role of people is very important here. Their opinion, what they think, or the way they can participate, and, and the public outreach, the potential outreach that has the astrobioethics. So let's examine this one by one. These three aspects should represent the initial point of debate for astrobioethics: the legal, ethical, and social. And I just put in each of them a representative concept, a representative idea. For example, the first one, legal aspect, policy of planetary protection, because you have a policy space. Policy of planetary protection is gonna talk about, for example, the Treaty of the AND, the United Nations Treaty about the outer space. We're gonna see it now. The second one is the ethical aspect, human beings as guardians of life in the universe. We're gonna see it also. Social aspect, the social responsibility in the informative aspect. And this has to do with, for example, what's our role, what's our participation against pseudoscience, for example, because pseudoscience in the life, in the topics, in issues of life in universe is very important. We have a educational role in all of this. So the legal aspect is about, for example, policy of planetary protection. Everything starts with the Treaty of the Outer Space of the United Nations. However, in this treaty, there is not much of astrobiological interest. It has been written in the 60s, but in that time, there was much interest in astrobiological research yet. But the point here is that it's the beginning of a serious point of views about our role and how to behave in space exploration. So the contribution of this treaty is our self-consciousness of what we are going to do, of who we are, or what's our interest in space exploration. Where are we going for peace, for war, for what, and how to behave? So this is a self-consciousness in a cosmic context, let's say. So here I have a little site. Outer space and celestial bodies are not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. So this should apply also for finding life in other celestial bodies. So because if one country or one enterprise find a different kind of life in a different celestial body, it shouldn't be allowed for them to claim the sovereignty or the path or any kind of appropriation because it's it's unethical. It's going against the astrobioethical principle that comes from this treaty of the United Nations. So these peaceful intentions that comes from the United Nations should be replicated in astrobioethics. I think that we can take this very important part of astrobioethics from this treaty of space of the United Nations. So with the Cospar, the Committee of Space Research, we have a direct astrobiological interest. I mean, uh, it's different with the Treaty of Outer Space of the United Nations. We didn't have any astrobiological interest, but with the Cospar, yes, we have, and we have even 5 different categories in its protocol for space missions. For example, we have we have category one. It includes it includes all the missions that are of no interest for the study of the chemical evolution of life. So category one, it not represent any interest in astrobiological goal yet. So let's leave the category one. Let's go for the category two. They are all the missions that may represent a relative interest for the evolution of life, with a remote probability that a spacecraft landing there compromises it for future investigations. So the astrobiological interest in category 2 is not just high. It's just, let's say, we have to be careful with the study of the object, but there is not yet some uh, chemistry interest for uh, life. Category 3, it includes some types of missions such as orbiting planets, orbiting objects, sorry, that have astrobiological interest and that when having contact with the object of study may compromise future research. So in this one, yes, we have some astrobiological interest because it's telling us that if you mess up with some celestial body that has the potential to have life or some future research for having life, uh, then you have to be careful because if you go and you don't have special treatment here, you might compromise the potential life that there is, for example, in Enceladus or in Mars. So when you are orbiting these objects, you have to follow uh, these steps, this category 3, to avoid any contact with the object that potentially have life or any chemistry of interest for having life. And the category 4, we have these are the missions involving rovers or probes landing on celestial objects that have a high astrobiological interest for the understanding of life in the universe. So, for example, the rover Curiosity, is inside the category 4, and this involves a high astrobiological interest. So, any steps, any precautions of sending these rovers the cleaner as possible are going to be taken. So the rover we're going to send for Mars have to be very clean. I mean, no possibility to contaminate Mars are allowed. We have to avoid that. But that's something curious because we have there the category four, and that's it. Then we have the category 5. And what says the category 5? It says that in this category fall all the missions that involve a sample return to the Earth. So we have the 4 and the 5. The 4 is about we going there, and the 5 is about uh, bringing something to the Earth. And when we have the category 5, we have to be very careful because we don't have to contaminate us. So we have a protocol to avoid our contamination. But how to avoid contamination in other planets? You only have the category 4 and you don't have any mention of ethics or moral consequences or any punishment to any nation or enterprise. That's a big missing point because you have a protocol that tells you how to act when you go to another planet, when you bring samples, but there is no any mention of punishment or something like that. Um, that's missing. Now, there is no mention, as I said, of the word ethics in this document. Its limitations is that only represent a protocol, but no further moral aspect is on discussion. There is no any discussion on this protocol. Astrobioethics must emphasize the ethical aspect. So, in my point of view, astrobioethics must fulfill these missing spots. And in the process of fulfilling these missing spots, we want to have a discipline uh, that is going to give you some answers and maybe more questions. Because let's remember, astrobioethics inherits the ethics philosophical part of it, which give us more questions more than answers. So, but in any way, there is an important role for astrobioethics right now to fulfill these missing spots in astrobiological exploration. Further discussion involves public awareness on these debates. I remember that there are already workshops discussing these topics, but there is not yet a protocol telling us what are, what are these consequences. Uh, Letting us know the social aspect on this. Before we go to the social aspect, let's analyze the ethical aspect then. In this situation, we're going to see that the ethical aspect of, of astrobioethics is different from the legal aspect. But because let's remember, the legal and the moral are not always together. You can have a law for something, but the law doesn't mean that it's moral, if you understand me. But let's go with the ethical aspect. Ethics is a branch of philosophy that studies the moral content of our acts and decisions. In astrobioethics, the issue is about if we humans have non-terran ethical responsibilities. So, what is this means? That are we human beings have a moral responsibility beyond than our terran responsibilities? Do we have any cosmical responsibilities? For example, are we the guardians of life in the universe? If answer is yes, then we must propagate it, because if we are the only ones protecting life in the universe, that's the logical answer. But if not, then propagated represents a real threat for other forms of life we do not know. Because remember, if we go and send people to Mars, with any certain that there is no life, then we might be compromised. We represent a real threat for the different form of life that might be living in Mars. Now, the principle of precaution is suggested for these situations. For example, what's the ideal amount of time for waiting until send people to Mars, considering that we must be sure there is no risk for extraterrestrial life? 50 to 100 years? You can say 10 years, maybe 30 years, even if you say 500 years. Let's say you say 500 years. If you say 500 years, okay, you have a long window of time where you do research to make sure there is no life, but science is not perfect. You can always have some spots that you are missing, and maybe in that missing spot there is life. So there's gonna be always be a risk. There is gonna be always be a risk in the idea of sending people on Mars or sending some organic components to Mars, and the the final judgment for this is gonna be upon on what the leaders of this research, what they think, why they consider, or what they judge. It's going to be up to them or the political situation. Let's remember that science is in part a product of culture, and maybe for political pressure, it's not going to be 500 years, maybe 50 years or 20 years, which is worst. Because what can you study in 20 years? Yeah. So you have always seen you have always this risk when you talk about the ethical aspect of astrobiology. because legal and ethical issues are not necessarily together. That's why ethical foundations are essential for setting the basis for an updated legal aspect. So let's remember the legal aspect in philosophy is very different from the moral aspect, not always together. And finally, we have the social aspect. This aspect is about the astrobiologist's responsibility, the public outreach, diffusion, and dissemination in science. These are three different dimensions of communication in science, and in which astrobiology has a very important role. Let's start with the more basic of them, the public outreach. This public outreach in astrobioethics must face pseudoscience. Extraterrestrial life has been very used in ufologists' places, for example, many times because the scientist's role is missing. What do I mean with this? For example, you have a table of debate, when you have maybe two ufologists, and then they give you a lot of invitation to participate, but you say no because it's going to be full of people who believe in extraterrestrials visiting us. But when you say no to that invitation, you're not saying no to that person who is inviting you. You're saying no to all that people that is expecting some answers. Maybe they are in the wrong places. But if you don't go there, it's gonna be a missing role. Uh, People is gonna be uh, how you call these people that has the chance to hear you, instead is gonna hear the pseudoscientists, and that's wrong. Many times here in Peru, for example, I hear scientists denying invitation for these public spaces of debate just because the reputation they say, but that's not good. You need to go and face people and tell your version of science, and not close yourself for the information you have. You have to to give your face to the public. Now, scientific diffusion, in the other hand, involves communication in science between a public who is in process of learning science. For example, amateurs, school, or first year undergraduate students. In scientific diffusion, there is a language of science a little bit more specific. In the first one, in the public outreach of science, you have a language, a way to say things more broadly, um, more for the people day to day. In scientific diffusion, you have a middle term of scientific way of say things. Now, in this scientific diffusion, you have the opportunity to make connection, to establish links between different disciplines. Let's remember that astrobiology and astrobioethics, for instance, they have the transdisciplinarity nature of science. So they have many different science in astrobiology. And when you have the speech of astrobiology or astrobioethics, you have the speech of many other different point of view of different sciences. So you make a big web of connections that allows you to understand the reality not in a parcellation way, but in an interconnected way. Now, dissemination is more about an specialized speech between researchers, and this is the stage where the transdisciplinarity level must point in astrobioethics. Of course, the first level is the public outreach, because if I am a philosopher and my partner is a biology and I don't know nothing about biology, my first point, my first um, uh, step to know biology is going to be simple language. But then you have to point to more if you want to do a serious business, serious research in astrobioethics. But then now we have that universities must promote transdisciplinary environments like workshops or parallel courses, and this is going to help astrobioethics to be nourished positively, because as long we have more interaction between more different disciplines in astrobioethics, it's going to be better, because ethics it's about communication, because it inherits from philosophy. Ethics is about dialogue, and this dialogue is also between disciplines. And let's see this. Ethics is about communication, okay. And astrobiology has to do with transdisciplinarity. So put together transdisciplinarity and dialogue from ethics. You have a good combination here. And you have a good place to have an interest environment for new ideas, for new potential, for new point of views. And this is just starting with astrobioethics. Astrobioethics is more openly for humanities because has these ethics components very explicit. In social aspect, astrobioethics discuss the political aspect of discovering life in the universe. For example, would religion change? Do you think, or do we think that religion is going to change, is going to disappear, or what's going to happen with religion? Cultural consequences and so on are topics also in astrobioethics. Of course, what's the degree of change or impact that's going to have this potential discovering of life in Mars, in the universe in general? Maybe it's going to happen like uh, Carl Sagan said in his book Contact. I don't know if you remember the movie also. I remember this scene when we had these terrorists trying to protect us from any contact from other kind of lives. So very crazy, but it's possible also. And then we have possible critic to astrobioethics. I found a couple of possible negative critics. The negative critic on astrobioethics could be that if astrobiologists don't have defined object of study, for example, what is life, then there is no sense in generate astrobioethics. Of course, somebody can say, what is life? You are studying life in universe, but you don't know what is life. So if you don't know what is life, why you even there to generate astrobioethics? This critique is wrong since science is made by constructs. What are these constructs? There are like building blocks of ideas. One construct is like a piece of a big how you call it, big panorama of a big picture. You have this idea and must fit in the picture. No any idea can fit in the picture. You have to use the right idea. And the definition of object of study is not precise in any scientific discipline. So when somebody says that astrobioethics is not allowed because we don't know what is life, it's just wrong. Because okay, you have life in astrobiology, but then you have other concept that there is no sufficient definition in science. For example, in physics, what is the matter at the end? What is the matter is kind of philosophical. Do we have a philosophical explanation of matter, of the matter in the universe? In philosophy, we have these problems. In philosophy of science, specifically. In any case, the structure of scientific knowledge inside astrobiology legitimizes it to be a science because independently that you have definition of life or not, you have the structure of astrobiology. The structure of astrobiology and astrobioethics is made by constructs. And since this is made by constructs, it's a science. Another critic is astroethics also exists. So astrobioethics is not essential. What this means? Uh, I'm sure you heard before about astroethics. I found myself with some papers and books talking about astroethics. But yes, might be considered an antecessor of astrobioethics. But astrobioethics is more specific about life in space. Also, astrobioethics recognizes the transdisciplinar role of research and public outreach, thing that you don't find in astroethics. In astroethics, you find some of these questions, but not established as in astrobiology. I don't know if you understand what I mean. In astrobioethics and in astrobioethics, in astrobiology also, you have a different nature, a different way of process these problems of life in universe. And by its nature, it's essential to be considered a new discipline. I mean, astroethics is like, I don't know, let's say, exobiology to astrobiology. In exobiology, you have a very narrow um, point of view, very narrow field of action. But instead, in astrobioethics, as in astrobiology, you have a broad field of action. So you have more opportunities to find more questions and answers in the process of astrobioethics than astroethics solely. So, and if you consider everything what I said in these 50 minutes, I think, astrobioethics emerged as a new field of study that it's a healthy connection between scientific point of view and the point of view from humanities. And in this process, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting see how the academic community is going to react when the new papers of astrobioethics are going to be published. What they're going to say, what the new critics they're going to express. And well, about astrobiotics, this is a little resume and with a little more addition that I made of this paper that I just made the comment of it to you at the beginning. And this is everything for now. Thank you. I don't know if you have some questions.
Thank you very much, Octavio. This is a wonderful presentation. It seems we at Blue Marble Space have been following astrobioethics without realizing it. So that's good. Also, thank you for giving this, in-depth presentation in English, which is not your native language, which is not something that's easy to do. So thank you very much for that effort. It was very enjoyable. My question is on the exploration about, you mentioned that humans may be the guardians of life in the universe, right? And if we are, that means we have to spread it to colonize. And if we're not, we shouldn't. We have to be very careful. Is there a middle ground, or is it completely explore, not at all, depending on whether we are alone in the universe? Because that's not something, that's not a question we'll be able to answer really, right?
Yeah, we can say that we have the answer yes or no because that's too extremist from the too, let's say, the narrow point of view. We can say that remembering the transdisciplinar way of do things, the answer is gonna depend of the context of the situation. We cannot have an answer right now. If we say we are the guardian of the universe, that's gonna be something of faith, something that one believes in as individual. But why? Because you need to have evidence. If you have the evidence of life in everything somewhere in the universe, well, depending on the situation of this life, you can do or not to do certain actions. But again, let's say this, we don't need to go far away to think about it. We have Mars. It's possible that in Mars there is life. If you send people to Mars, you are risking the potential life on Mars. That's a fact. There is a risk. So how long you have to wait until send the people to Mars? It's gonna depend on the political situation, on the public interest, economical interest, and then of course we have now there in this debate we have the astrobioethics. So astrobioethics is going to help us to think the the better fundamentation It's going to help us to make decisions. It's going to help us to have the framework to make decisions. So maybe to not feel you bad for taking this decision, maybe, I don't know, sometimes happens. Or maybe you're just following the evidence. But at the end, if you have evidence, at the end, it's going to be the same. It's going to be because ethics is not a hard science. And astrobioethics has variety of ethics. So at the end, it's going to depend of a human factor. When you have less risk, you can put 500 years, but it's going to be the same. 500 years is nothing in a planetary context. You know that.
Okay, so it seems like we should use your fundamental of precaution while we explore, assuming that we are alone, and then once we do find life, then just really stop and think about the next steps, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions?
Hi, Octavio. Thank you very much for your talk. I just want to ask you sort of a kind of wild hypothetical question. Let's just say that we hypothesize that there is microbial life on Mars.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we're facing some real ethical challenges and dilemmas there with regard to planetary protection, particularly if humans are going to go to Mars. And if that's going to happen relatively soon, and if Elon Musk and some other entrepreneurs have anything to say about it, it will happen relatively soon, more like your 20 years rather than 200 years. So what do you see a difference, an ethical difference between the situation if that microbial life on Mars had a common origin with life on Earth, or if it's a separate genesis of life from life on Earth? Do you see an ethical difference between those two situations?
Good question. I would start with the ontological interest. What I mean, life independently is related to Earth or not, it's life there. So in this, if we start from this idea, we're going to have to protect it, and the ethical implication is going to be the same in this framework, because it's life itself, and independently it came from the Earth or not, it's now life on Mars. And the ethical implication, I think, is going to be the same. No difference if it's extraterrestrial or terrestrial, because since it's living there and it's independent from us, that's enough.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Octavio, can you hear me? Is it working now?
Yes, I hear you.
Good. So I was happy that you talked about space policy and the tie-in to the Outer Space Treaty, which is definitely, I think astrobiology has a lot to offer in terms of the lens that we're viewing space exploration. So I don't necessarily have a particular question. I actually wanted to mention that we've been having a lot of discussions about space policy and space settlement through Blue Marble Space, and this might be a conversation that you may be interested in continuing to contribute to. We've been holding meetings every couple of months, and there's, you gave a really great overview of really broad topics, and so the Outer Space Treaty, we've spent a couple of meetings really unpacking that, and I think there's certainly, we have a couple of legal experts who've been helping us understand this, but there's certainly the legal expertise, the ethical expertise, philosophical expertise, in addition to the science, really important in understanding this. So I guess we can follow up over email in inviting you to join these conversations. I just ask a question though for the purpose of this. What do you think are the most important what's the most important vantage point that astrobiology brings to thinking about the Outer Space Treaty and the future of the Outer Space Treaty?
Well, the Outer Space Treaty, when I read it, I seen very limited point of view if we compare it to the present. let's remember that outer space treaty was written in the 60s. So from the 60s to our age to our year, a very long difference, and it needs to be updated. We need to make a committee, a special committee, and say to the United Nations, hey, let's update this space outer treaty because we don't have any other reference now. We have the policy of protection, but mm, we need more. We need a regulation with some punishments also explicit, what you can do, what you cannot do, and which countries are involved, and what's the paper of the how you call the enterprises, all the actors involved, being very specific. We need a document that uh, show to us all these details because until now you have, for example, SpaceX wants to send people sooner or later. It's an enterprises. But what says the United Nations about it? What says the Outer Space Treaty about astrobiological interests? Nothing. What happens if they contaminate Mars? What says the Outer Space Treaty? Nothing. Nothing. You go find you. I read all the document. Nothing about what happens. And me, Octavio Chon wants to go to Mars and live there. I don't know. And I contaminate the planet. Nobody sent me to jail. I don't have to pay nothing to anybody. So right now it's like free for all. Literally, it's free for all, and we need to convince the United Nations to change, update this space treaty sooner,
Yeah,
but the sooner the better.
yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. We're actually working on that internally, like Jacob mentioned, with Blue Marble Space and thinking of ways to update the Outer Space Treaty. But the challenge we found, if we go through the UN process, it is so slow compared to how fast space exploration technology is advancing that we think that it's actually not a viable solution. So, but we can have this conversation internally. We have another group that's focusing on thinking of ways to revise the Outer Space Treaty. It'd be wonderful if you be involved.
I would recommend to do the update by ourselves and give it to the United Nations as a proposal.
Yeah, there's there are many different paths we're thinking about on how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So but there are challenges in all of them. So before we close, maybe we have time for one more question. If not, Octavio, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on astrobioethics. Very much looking forward to the paper. I'm glad that's a topic that emerged from the Columbia conference. This is wonderful.
I'm gonna give a speech of this astrobioethics at the next international conference in Chile, November.
Okay, great. Hopefully we can stream this conference somehow. Is Armando organizing it?
No, it's the International Union of Astronomy.
Oh, it's an IAU conference. Okay, very cool. Fantastic. Okay, well, great to see you all. Thank you again, Octavio. It was very, very interesting. Please let me know when the paper comes out, and I'll distribute it.
Sure.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.